India is expected to have a digital economy of 1 trillion by 2025. And in terms of electronic devices industries in the world, we anticipate reaching 400 billion by that year. India produces over 600 units of mobile phone units every minute, and about 160 phones are sold online every minute. However, what is also true is China and Taiwan account for about 40% of the global electronic manufacturing services market. Currently, India accounts for less than 5% of the global EMS market, and a large part of India's electronic manufacturing caters to its domestic market. Are companies now considering India for electronics, and does India represent a viable manufacturing destination? To talk more about this, we have with us today Ajay Chaudhary, founder HCL, Nitin Kolyankar, President Manufacturer Association for Information Technology, and Amrit Manwani, CMD, Sashri Electronics. Thank you all for joining us today. So, Mr. Chaudhary, if we can come straight, India has never had a true commercial chip manufacturing fab. We did set up the semiconductor complex in 1980, but somehow did not capitalize on it. How did India miss out on the electronic manufacturing space? You have been closely associated with this industry for decades now. What are your observations?
See, SCL was really built originally for low volume. And it was pretty much more like a lab than a manufacturing facility. And over a period of time, there was a fire and all kinds of things happened. Then finally, it was moved from METI to space. And that's where it stayed, where requirements are very small volume for strategic requirements. So it's served its purpose as far as the availability of output is concerned, but it's pretty underutilized even as it is. So that is where it rests. I think we missed the bus on semiconductors for many, many years. And I think several governments over the years tried to bring semiconductor manufacturing to India. And there was consistent confusion in the country whether we should have semiconductors or not. This is not something we should be questioning at all. I mean, we are a large country. We have very large requirements. I mean, you just talked about phones. I mean, look at the size of the requirement that we have in this country. And over the last 3-4 years, the manufacturing of electronics is growing, but there is no manufacturing of semiconductors happening. So I think the earlier governments completely missed out the whole strategic importance of having semiconductor manufacturing in India.
Nitin, Chaudhary talked about how we missed the bus, but where does it come to when it comes to electronic manufacturing in India? Where do we stand now? And also, again, your opinions on why did China emerge as the heart of technology supply chain instead of India?
Yes. Indian government derailed a process in the past. If you see, since India went for ITA 1, there was no backup arrangement made to take advantage of exports. We didn't create an export-led growth. We tried creating an import substitution policies. As a result of, and we went on signing at the same time, we went on signing FTAs. As a result of that, what happened is we lost the domestic market as well as you started become a very import destination. People started importing most of the ITA1 products with zero duty regime. At the same time, we created in 2007 a special additional duty regime wherein imported products were put special additional duty and traders were given a set off as they were paying VAT or sales tax. As a result of which you were paying, there was an inversion of duty. To cover up that inversion, you had to make a value addition of roughly around 40 to 45%. And that was next to impossible. Plus you were having service tax credit. So most of the manufacturers in India who were in CKD or SKD mode were not able to manufacture. And inverted duty became additional tax for manufacturing. And people slowly started moving towards trading. So our FTAs were never beneficial to us in the past. Every FTA, we lost the our exports. Secondly, Indian manufacturers also largely didn't try to create a value chain and a component ecosystem. Neither the government tried aggregating the demand, as a result of which the entire system was getting into a mess. And Taiwan, though, was becoming an expensive destination, at the same time, India got into inverted duty regime and other policy failures, and China started giving heavy incentives, subsidies, as a result of which we lost considerably. And till 2014, when this government came to PM Modi Saab and new government came to power, they started refocusing at this sector, manufacturing sector. They came out with Make in India, but immediately they could not do anything. It took 4-5 years. And now they are talking about GST also has come up. Now they are talking about PLI scheme, and slowly India is now getting into a manufacturing domain. So this kind of time and the policy failures of India from 2000, I would say 2002 to 2014 or 2015, led to emergence of China as one of the hub in manufacturing, because we give them open market. We didn't realize the potential that India had and the markets that India had. Neither we tried to create value chain, not only in terms of components, but also in terms of logistics. China built up a robust logistic or supply ecosystem for their component industry as well. It's not that China is not importing, they are importing considerably high. China's import has also gone up considerably high, but they are participating in the global value chain. They started supplying, and that is where India's one of the best port is one of the worst ports of China. So you look at this particular aspect. India even today does not have an international transshipment point to support your exports. So it has to be export-led growth, but just not by giving PLI, but also you need to cover up for the logistic disabilities by improving the efficiency in the ports, and also to create shipping lines and also international transshipment point. These are the need of the hour. So we need to get into this very strategically, step by step.
Right. So Vanwani, you are in the electronic manufacturing space. What do you make of India's production capacity? Do we have the infrastructure, the market, the volumes to become a serious player? I mean, it's not just about having policies. For example, in semiconductor production, you need a lot of water. You need electricity. Do we have all those things in place?
Let me put it this way. This morning, I was attending a seminar where the minister, Honorable Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, and also Mr. MOS, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, inaugurated the vision document that has been prepared by the industry, and they have already scaled it down from $400 billion to $300 billion. And in the $300 billion, as of today, sitting here in 2022 January, we are doing about 74 billion. So we have to cover a huge ground in the next 3 to 4 years, which is quite a daunting task. And I'll tell you why. See, in electronic manufacturing, if we were to go up to $300 billion, that means the components that would be required for that would be somewhere between 100 to 150 billion, 40 to 50% components. We don't have any ecosystem for components. We don't have an infrastructure for component manufacturing. So that is one aspect. So it's a very challenging task to assume that we will go to $300 billion in the next 4 years. Second, if you look at, even if we had the infrastructure, the point is component manufacturing is a very unique segment where your sales to assets ratio or capital ratio is roughly about 1:1. So if the country of India were to increase component manufacturing, India would need to spend about $150 billion to get $150 billion worth of components to make $300 billion worth of electronic products. That is one. And secondly, today, the the government of India has put a very ambitious target of $120 billion in exports by 2026. Today, we are doing, probably $14 billion. So you are looking at almost 8 to 10x in 4 years. Where is it going to come from? As Nitinji rightly said, our infrastructure in terms of ports, airports is just not there. So it's a daunting task.
Right, daunting task. Mr. Chaudhary, if I can come to you, the current policy schemes that we have, are they in the right direction? What more do we need to do? I mean, it's clear that electronics to reach the levels that the government wants to, you need to have things like logistics, infrastructure, everything in place.
You see, if you look at the policies for the last 4 or 5 years, they have encouraged manufacturing. So PLI scheme has come and there is large scale manufacturing that is happening. So manufacturing is sort of trying to cope up with demand to some extent and is rising as fast as the demand. But the reality of the matter is that the value addition in the country is very poor. So unless there is high value addition in the country, the benefit to the country of PLI schemes is not there to that extent. So if we look at the new semiconductor policy, the good part is that they've finally taken a strong view that semiconductor manufacturing is required in the country, right? So that's the first thing that has been done. The second thing that's been done is that they've added DLI inside that, design-led incentive scheme. So that is a very good scheme to encourage design of chips in India. And so what is now going to happen is that you'll have the full ecosystem, design of chips, manufacturing in foundries, and ATMP where packaging will be done. So that's as far as the whole semiconductor ecosystem is concerned. But more importantly, what will create the demand for these semiconductor plants is the biggest question. And the answer to that is that unless we have products manufactured in India with high value addition, this demand for semiconductors will not happen. So interestingly, within the policy, they have mentioned that they will aggregate the demand of products for government buying, and that demand they will unleash on manufacturers so that they can then create the demand for corporates. But this needs to be done like yesterday, because if you want to set up a plant today, and it will take you 3 to 4 years to set up the plant, by that time the demand should have been created. Now, if we want this demand to be created, the government should immediately take bold steps to release this aggregated demand of tablets, routers, smart meters, you name it, all these products that the government needs. And if you look at it, government has 80 to 90% of this demand. So if they can unleash this demand on Indian manufacturers with Indian brands and domestic value addition, then it will benefit the semiconductor plant. Otherwise, it's a chicken and egg situation. You will have a great semiconductor plant with no orders domestically. Because let's face it, all products today are designed in South Korea, China, or the US. Now, will the Chinese companies buy Indian semiconductors? No. Will the South Koreans buy Indian semiconductors? No. They have their own foundries. They don't need us. So, this is a very important issue to be taken care of if we want to make semiconductor manufacturing happen.
So a bit of a chicken and egg situation, Nitin. So when it comes to electronics, we have on one side the domestic demand that we need to spur. Other part is, to reduce dependency on imports and match China. Does the PLI scheme has what it takes to, make that a reality, reduce our import dependence?
Actually, if you really look at the PLI scheme, it is more export-led growth strategy, which I just mentioned. Now, the if you look at the targets that are set to get, first of all, there is a threshold. You need to go beyond the threshold of the existing turnover. Then you need to make at least 4 times to 6 times. Product to product, there are different structures. If you need to achieve that turnover, which is very ambitious, you have no choice other than you have to have an export focus or a huge market presence, which is next to impossible. That means your consumption power has to go up. Your buying capacity of Indians has to go up. There's so many other factors. It's not that you will just produce and give it to somebody in air. So there has to be an economic cycle created, which does not exist for last 3 years, especially with the COVID and pre-COVID recession. There is certainly impact. The pockets are not very deep of the Indian consumer. So most of the products have, except for 3G, 5G products and all, which are having an impact from the government or a large scale infrastructure projects. Rest of the products are more consumption led. So we need to export. Now, as we discussed now, there is no export, a very focused export strategy. So we need to work on this now. Government has to take a lead as a demand aggregator in creating a global demand, inclusive of the domestic demand. And I think we should target at least 30-40% of domestic consumption and the rest of the things coming from the exports, and not necessarily the bigger markets like developed market. We can look at a lot of niche markets. Today, Africa also has 100 billion mobile users. So we need to capture Africa in a very different way. We need to look at this demand creation. Government has to work on dedicated freight corridors. China has done that. A lot of other countries have done it. Japan has done it. So we need dedicated freight corridors, very cheap airlines. But the most important part, let me tell you, before industry can derive the benefits, cash benefits of PLI, the government has already started reaping the benefits by way of, the increased production that is happening. The government is getting GST for whatever that is sold domestically. The economic cycle that is happening slowly on manufacturing expansion. See, manufacturing has a larger economic value chain than that of a service activity. So today that started happening. Look at some of the companies' stock market pricing. It has gone up multifold. That means whatever the trading that is happening, government also is collecting short-term capital gains or long-term capital gains and other things. So government's revenue cycle has started. The benefits for the government and economic, but to the investor, it's very less because they are long-term. So we need to work out that there has to be a strategy to incentivize the manufacturer in a short term also, just give them certain benefits immediately. But we also need a lot of investment support. Second part is government in semiconductors talked about demand aggregation. Today, the central government cannot create a demand for the chips through a demand aggregation policy. That's very less. With almost through government buying. Today, 50% of the government buying is with the states as well. And states are in not control. You can't control states saying that you must buy these semiconductors from these people. You need to also see the competition law, which is going to come in force. You are going to give PLI only to the two semiconductor industries. If that is a case, that means you are also going to create demand aggregation for 2 guys, right? Just look at it. Now you see from the, they are restrictive trade practices, right? So you need to also look out at all these angles. So government should now start opening up the economy. We have to accept that states are not in sync up with the central government. 80% of the demand comes from majority of the bigger states, where the government is not in sync with the central government, or rather they are going to do a lot of things reverse. So the synergy today is very crucial between central and state governments. Today we are losing out heavily as a country on manufacturing hub just because there is no clear synergy. The incentives which are offered by state and the center are different.
Right. Amrit, if I can come to you, Nitin talks about thinking big, looking at different angles. One of the aspects that is not, talked about too often is electronics also need rare earth materials like lithium, which is used in EVs in large quantities. Are we doing enough to source those raw materials and secure them?
Well, there are 2 things. This myth about rare earth they're really not rare elements. I was just looking at some data which says that the rare earth elements are globally are 200 times more than the gold reserves. So the rare earth elements are not as rare as we think them to be. The only problem is that these rare earth elements are, scattered, not concentrated. So therefore, managing mining and all becomes a little bit tedious. I don't know whether you know that before 1965, there were only two countries who used to make rare earth elements. It was India and Brazil. And over the years, it moved to other countries, but China dropped the prices unreasonably low, so everybody had to get out of that domain. So China, for at least a decade, continued to give lower prices, but after that they have increased, and so that's a strategy that China did. Now, similar strategy can be done. Today, rare earths are, there are huge deposits in many other countries, including India. Maybe not as much as, let's say, Russia or Malaysia or Thailand. These countries have rare earth deposits. So India has to, work with these countries to ensure that the supply chain for rare earth elements is there. Number one. Number two, why do we have to depend on rare earth elements? I mean, we, for example, in the LCD displays, these countries who are using rare earth elements, that is not the only solution. There are other solutions whereby you reduce your these elements input and do something else. So I would say that it's not really a major cause of concern, even for EVs.
Right. Mr. Chaudhary, coming back to you, beyond the need to manufacture, we also need the skills to pull it off. Do we have the trained manpower to do what we want to achieve in terms of, production around electronics?
Well, actually, I'm chairman of the Electronic Skills Council. As a matter of fact, the two other gentlemen are members of my board. And that's what we do for a living. We actually work on creating skills for manufacturing, service, etc., for the electronic industry. So that's not an issue to my mind. The number of people available to do that is clearly meeting the requirement. What we need to do is upscale more and more and more. And the biggest challenge that we have seen in the past is that a lot of companies just take people from the road and train them instead of buying skilled manpower. So this whole issue of taking skilled manpower, which is certified, is something that doesn't exist as a concept in India. Whether you look at electronics or any other industry, everybody just goes and picks up people from the market who are unskilled, and they learn at our cost. So the fellow will enter your house, he will work on your electronic gadgets, he will destroy a few, and he'll learn, and then he'll go and repair somewhere else. Now, this whole needs to change. So we've been talking to the government to say, why can't we market this whole idea that skills are good to have? Till now, the challenge in India is that everybody looks at a degree. They don't look at a vocation as an important issue. So I think this is where a major change has to come. The government has, in the new education policy, now degrees are going to be given for vocation. I think that will change the situation. But a lot of behavior change has to be done among people to say, why do you want to get a degree in chemistry? Why don't you learn how to manufacture electronic products? So, that is where the issue is. The second point is that for the design end of it, we have definitely got some weaknesses. In the VLSI design, we have reasonable numbers that needs to be increased quite dramatically. Because with the new DLI policy, they can, there is a clear plan there to increase the number of people who can do VLSI design. So that is another piece. But what is missing is product design. Product design capability is quite poor in the country. The challenge is that all the IITs and engineering colleges teach you design, but they don't teach you design to manufacturing. They don't teach you how to design for service. They don't teach you how to design for bomb. So all these issues are missing, and I've actually made a paper for the government on this, so that this whole gap can be closed. And this design to manufacturing piece needs to be brought in pretty aggressively. And so that is what will, make the numbers happen. But the last point that I want to mention is that as we set up semiconductor plants, we don't have a research facility for it. So we need a research facility that goes along with semiconductor plants. If you look at all major countries that set up semiconductor facilities, they also created a parallel research facility where lots and lots of work needs to be done so that the semiconductor plant can benefit from it. And lastly, we don't have semiconductor manufacturing engineers in this country. That needs to be created. So there are these pluses and there are these minuses. But this is the current status of the skills situation in India in electronics.
But it looks like the minuses you have talked about, this will take some time. I mean, overnight, you cannot have, research in a sector. You cannot have design specialists. This is going to take time, right?
These are things that need to be done parallel. What we have done is that we've announced this semiconductor policy, but I think this is a big hole in the semiconductor policy. The research piece is missing. And that is an essential part. Look at what Belgium did. It created a fantastic organization called IMEC. And IMEC today supplies designs to the whole world. Now, if we actually go about manufacturing in India, we'll be buying designs from elsewhere. And also look at Singapore. They did the same thing 20 odd years ago. When they set up semiconductor plants, they also created a parallel research institute.
Then if I can come to you, how strong are the sectoral disabilities? You talked about some of them. How will they impact economies of scale and ensuring ease of doing business? Are there any low-hanging fruits that we can address?
So first, I must touch you as you just talked about skilling, and that's a very important aspect. If you recollect, under the chairmanship of Padma Shri Ajay ji, in 2012, there was a task force set up for ESDM. And for the first time in the history of India, while drafting an economic policy, a policy also was drafted parallelly as a subset of that as HR in ESDM. And even today, in 9 years, that holds true. Word to word is applicable even today. And I must compliment Padma Shri Ajay ji towards that. You look at it, what has happened. We are trying to create an economy of assembly-led growth, not a design-led growth. As a result of it, in assembly also, you created a SKD-led business. That's what happened in 2010 to 2015 or 17. In that process, what happened? You just needed packers and simple assemblers. So you never needed educated people or technically skilled people. It's only last 4 years you started creating policies and started integrating. Gradually, there is a little demand for more skills coming into the system. We created a financial incentive which was not worth the subsidy. If you apply it over number of people actually engaged qualitatively was huge. Today, the things are changing and I must compliment the government towards it. So first thing is that. So second thing is you must understand that the future is faster than what we think. Things are just going to happen. Nothing is in our control. Technology is coming up in a big way to rule over and take share in every pie of our life. So our engineering from reactive engineering, which we just now spoke about, has to move towards proactive engineering. We need to assess the engineering requirement. IIT, every high-tech institute of this country has to think about the emerging technological requirements and create engineering skills towards that. There is no research happening. Our academicians, except few, are more reactive. They'll just take something. For last so many years, the same content is being taught. I'm also part of IIT Goa. I'm also on the engineering colleges. I've been part of a lot of institutions. I myself is in education. I've seen the quality and the content is pathetic across the country, whether it is CBSE, you name the institute. We need to revamp keeping future in mind. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be a mess. Second, on ease of doing business. The so-called pathetic way of identifying ease of doing business is not the thing which makes us competitive. The actual ease of doing business is something evaluated and let industry do that. The real, most of the states, they are mapped in terms of how they facilitate investment. Facilitating investment is one of the lowest thing that could happen. What is more important is sustenance of that investment over a period of 10 years. And you see the hassle that industry goes through, whether it is getting an electricity connection, getting uninterrupted power. Even there is a power policy in most of the states for net zero billing. If you adopt solar, still the things are not transparent. You look at the logistic hassle. In spite of GST, still checkposts are concerned. People, trucks, lorries are stopped. Unless they pay X amount, they're not allowed to move. This concept of checkpost should go.
Mr. Mondani, if I can come to you, what do you think? Nitin talked about a lot of aspects, but what do you think at the moment we are doing right, and what do we need to do to strengthen manufacturing, electronic manufacturing?
Well, I have a contrary view to what Nitin is saying. Of course, I agree that there is corruption, that ease of doing business is a big problem, but we have to start somewhere. And I think the introduction of PLI and the spec scheme for capex subsidy is just a step in the right direction. The various states are also coming out with electronic policies. Now the implementation is slow. I agree with that. But at least this has begun. Everybody has started to realize that all the states want electronics to come to their state. So that's a step in the right direction. Besides that, about a few months ago, the government of India organized a seminar called Gati Shakti, where they had, called 17 ministries, and they said, how can we interact with each other so that the industry is not hurt? Because today what happens is Ministry of Electronics may give good SOPs, but either Ministry of Commerce puts a roadblock, or Ministry of Labor puts a roadblock, or Ministry of Infrastructure puts a roadblock. And as Nitin rightly said, you get stopped at the checkpost and all that. That is there. I mean, it'll not go overnight. But I think the step in the right direction has been taken. And the result is, to a certain extent, evident. I mean, I agree that the value add has been less, but look at it this way, that up until 2015-16, before the PMP policy of mobile phones came out, there was virtually no export of mobile phones. Last year, or the year before last actually, there was a $3 billion worth of mobile phones that exported. And I think this year it'll be probably double. And we have a potential to export something like $90 billion worth of mobile phones. So, these things take time. Government's hands are also tied up because, there are political issues to tackle. Nitin is absolutely right that both the states and center have to come on board on the same page. That is not happening because of political reasons or otherwise. Land is the state subject. Center has no control over it. So yeah, it's a nightmare to get land registered. I'll give you an example. Exactly 5 years ago, we got 100 acres of land for a Taiwan cluster in Greater Noida. Till today, 5.5 years down the road, the land has not been registered. I mean, who can wait? And that's why people, even foreign investors, they get, disillusioned with the country. So they are, they always question our ability. But, nothing is lost. I think to any industry to grow, there are three factors: human capital, financial capital, and energy. I think we have done reasonably well on energy. We have to do something more on the financial capital in terms of, the financial incentives. Push the banks to loan to SMEs and even large companies. Don't insist on 100% collateral and all that stuff. That has to go, and the rates have to come down. But the human capital, I think we score over China. Now, the third point that I would like to make is, unfortunately, and I'm sure Ajay Chaudhary will agree with me, that despite all that, there is no connect between the industry and academia. The academia is looking at publishing papers in foreign journals, make a foreign trip, and that's about it. There is no genuine research being done to increase manufacturing in the country. He gave the example of VLSI. There is no research being done in VLSI. Uh, these points have to be taken in the right spirit by the government, by academia, by the industry. We have to, work together, have a trust between each other, and go forward. Nothing is lost. Because of the geopolitical reasons, we have a good opportunity right now. And on top of that, our demographic dividends are very high compared to any other country in the world today. So if we don't take benefit of that now, we'll probably again miss the bus, as Ajay said earlier.
Right. Nothing is lost. So let me come to the last question, and this remains the same for all of you. Chaudhary, first to you. What is your wish list from budget this year? What should the government and the finance minister do?
Well, actually, as I said earlier, demand creation is very important if you want to make electronics happen. Today, in the last 15, 20 years, all Indian brands have gone away. Everything has become Chinese. And maybe small part is South Korean and others. So in a manner, we are a colony of China today. And so it's East India Company all the way, all over. We need to change this. So we need to create Indian brands. Now, as Nitin said earlier, when WTO was signed by India, everything got destroyed as far as design and manufacturing and MSMEs are concerned. And everything became clearly import-oriented and trading. It all changed. Everything got changed. We need to bring all that back. To bring all that back, government demand, as I said earlier, needs to be aggregated and also coordinate with the states to make it happen. So, for example, my suggestion would be that why can't we provide tablets to literally all school children who have lost 2 years of education? This would be my requirement from the budget, because this will enable a mix of, even as we go forward and open schools, it'll create a mix of hybrid teaching, which will be required for the children to catch up to what they have lost in the last 2 years. And for that, broadband is also a requirement. So I've been talking about this to the government for many years. Make broadband a fundamental right. I mean, just the way you are creating highways, why can't we create digital highways for everyone? And if we create digital highways, they'll bring the whole country together faster than you can think. So I think these are the two things that I would like the government to do in this particular budget, where a large requirements of tablets is created, and don't allow tablets to be created without repairing capability. Today, all tablets in India which are imported, you cannot even open the screws at the back. There are no screws. You look at your phone, you look at your tablet, you can't even open it. You can't even change your battery. So India is very seriously working on a repair policy that needs to be implemented. Because for all electronics, we need to look at a concept of repair, reuse, and recycle. Otherwise, we'll create a huge e-waste piece in this country.
Right. Nitin, what are your wishes for the budget?
So I would say it's very high time that government spends substantial amount on integration of spending and the demand aggregations. So what is that integration of spending? For example, just now Ajay has said, you spend substantially on digital highway. That alone will have major multiplier effect by benefiting education sector. Today, you have moved to online education, but it's in a pathetic state. The quality, 25 to 30%, or maybe more than 60% rural people are unable to access the proper quality of education. there is no broadband, there is no, or there's no power. So you need to integrate digital highways along with the energy needs at the last mile. So fiber to the last mile and energy to the last mile, both should be the motto. This will transform India. Otherwise, you are running an online course, you are running a class, but you don't know whether students are attending properly or no. Secondly, the attention span, everything has been impacted. There's a major psychological impact on the children today. Major. It's a biggest opportunity for India to reinvent online education. We cannot be equated with the developed countries like US and other part of the world. The rural India still has a challenge in catching up with English for a beginner. So we need to adopt technologies, and today substantial number of Indian techies are hungry to create these platforms. Support them, create an enabling environment where you invest in digital highways, where tablet, broadband, everything becomes very inclusive and reaches out to the last mile. And also power needs. You need to have also developments in solar energy where you need not wait for government power or normal energy. You need to go for solar energy where you can work over it. So this way we'll bridge the gap. This is my first thing. Second, invest substantially on making India free from very, very old and archaic legal system. It's messy. It's taking India only backward. No one in the country knows how many legal compliances that you have to make. No one, not a single person must be knowing how many legal compliances that you have to make. And third thing is, like, trust industry for creating an economic multiplier. Service sector will also be benefited, but over dependence on service sector will not help to take India to 10 to 11% of GDP growth. If you want that in the manufacturing, then it will come at a high cost. Because you need to invest in infrastructure, skills and all everything, but the economic spin-off will be one of the best. And the world has proved it. All the developed countries have proved it. So our overdependence in the past on services, because it was easy money coming in, and neglecting manufacturing sector, we have paid a price. It's time that we correct it. These are my two key demands.
Wonderful. So I think we did out a we put out a story which says that in 2021 there were 3,680 changes to the law, which means around 15 changes of businesses had to face every working day. So that's the kind of compliance changes that every businesses face, which is again far better than 4,680, which was in 2020. So 2021 was a little better for businesses. But on that note, Amrit, what are your budget wishes?
Well, I have some specific, suggestions. Number one, the FTA agreements are absolutely disadvantageous to SEZ units. As an SEZ unit, you cannot sell in domestic because there are, you can, but there are conditions, NFE, net foreign exchange, etc. While for FTA, there are no conditions. You are part of the FTA country, so you can get duty-free, no questions asked from Thailand or Malaysia or whatever. So, what should happen is that SEZs should be allowed to sell in domestic market. There should be no NFE condition. If at all, you could put a condition like employment generation. And that will help employment situation also, and will help the domestic manufacturers. Point number one. Point number two, I think, what we have to realize is that in any country, whether it is the US, whether it is Taiwan, Japan, Korea, you see any country, even Germany, SME are the drivers of economy. There might be 100 odd big companies, but there are thousands and thousands of SMEs in the US or in UK or Germany as well. Now, currently, if you set up a new company, you get 15% income tax limit. Why don't you extend that to SMEs? That way, people will invest. The smaller manufacturers will come into manufacturing in a big way. So that is my ask number two. Ask number 3 is that, the PMA policy, it's a good policy. And as Ajay said, the demand has to be aggregated. But more importantly, you have to give strong support to that PMA policy. That, if there is a local manufacturer, he should be given the benefit of getting the business rather than somebody who is either supplied from outside or, even foreign companies who are operating in India. They have only very clear, if the opportunity goes away, they wind up and go, or they change elsewhere. The SMEs are not going to do that. They are here for good and forever. So the PMA policy has to be given more teeth. Then, clearly, as Ajay has said, Nitin also has said, invest in logistics infrastructure. Heavy investment is required, and I hope the budget addresses that. Incentivize scalability. Unfortunately, in our country, what happens the moment you scale up, you have to pay more taxes. It doesn't make sense. Give fiscal support to blue collar and white collar workforce for manufacturing. Only then you will be able to attract people in manufacturing. Today, nobody wants to get into manufacturing. They're looking for service jobs, as my other fellow panelists said, or they are looking for going overseas. How do we retain them here? Give them adequate fiscal support. Only then we will be able to get them to work in the industry, in the manufacturing industry in the country. And the electronic manufacturing sector is set to grow worldwide. Today the global market for electronic products is about $2 trillion, and it's expected to go by 2026 to about $7 to $8 trillion. And we are looking at, so it's going to grow four times, and we are looking at 74 to 300. Will we achieve it, or will we fall behind? If the policies don't change, we're sure to fall behind. These were some of the asks that I had.
So demand aggregation, logistics, setting up digital highways, skills, a lot of things for the government to work on. I hope some of this gets addressed in the budget this year, if not all. And I hope the sector continues to perform. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you.